the Bridge International. So a coworker, Mika, had first expressed interest or first told me about the Bridge International and the work that they were doing. So I had a chance to catch up with Kathy and Cruz some time ago and just heard the type of work that they are doing right around the corner, actually. And I was really astonished about all the work that they were doing and what were they hoping to do. So as we kind of transition from our vision series for justice, I thought that this would be a great opportunity for people to get to see and get to know what justice looks like throughout the city. So, Cruz, I want to hand it off to you, and if you could just give us a little bit of information about yourself and how you got engaged with the bridge.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. My name's Cruz. I'm one of the founders of the Bridge International, as well as the public relations coordinator. So, me and the founders actually met in a previous agency. They were employed. I was basically the intern, and in serving under them, I really got to see what labor trafficking specifically looked like. Um, it was one of the first times I was not only introduced to what labor trafficking looked like, but I went out to the farms and like where we go to bring these hygiene kits, and it was a completely different experience than what I was expecting. Not just like the living conditions, but even the sense of not feeling safe where we were. And it kind of started to raise some questions in my mind, because we entered a farm, and you you know there was plenty of signs that said, hey, we have guns, we have cameras, we're watching. And it was just very suspicious why just a random farm in the middle of nowhere, if you're not doing anything wrong, you're not up to anything out of the ordinary, why you would have such safety measures or precautions. But it was during that time and actually serving through that agency, and also some of my prior experience in the anti-trafficking efforts, we all in our own ways started to see some gaps within the anti-trafficking movement. And my co-founders, they have, I mean, a lot of extensive experience. And so collectively, we started to see these gaps, and it just it started to stir on their hearts, like, we have to do something, we have to do something, we have to do something. And it was right around quarantine when all these other agencies were closing their doors, and everybody was trying to figure out how does it look like to still serve farm workers, how does it still look like to serve victims of human trafficking and things of that nature, was when we realized, like, we now than ever, like more than ever, we need to be out there. And so from that, the Bridge International was birthed. And in our first 6 months of just kind of getting our toes wet, if you will, we were able to serve over 1,700 farm workers in the triangle.
Wow.
And we were able to serve from March to October of 2020, we were able to serve over 2,000 individuals in our labor outreach, but also just our street outreaches that we do. And so the Bridge International is a 501c3, and we're a nonprofit based out of Durham, but we serve, the greater Triangle area. And really, what our heart and our mission is to empower and support survivors of human trafficking. And we do that through community awareness. We do that, as you've already heard, we do that through our outreach. And we're currently working on offering housing. Our hope is that the way you're going to bridge gaps is by serving underserved communities and populations. Think marginalized people, that's who we want to serve. There's a lot of different populations within the movement that are often overlooked, or if they're not being rejected, they're being looked at differently, and people have these judgments or reservations in how they offer services. And so we just want to um, come alongside anyone who desires healing, and that's who we are.
Yeah. So what's interesting, and this is probably on bad on my end, but when I think of human trafficking, I do not think of migrant farmers. I usually think of sex trafficking or forced prostitution or whatever it may be. But why do you think that's the case? Is like when we think of human trafficking, we don't even think about the migrant farmers.
I mean, a lot of it has to do with the media. Um, if everybody just kind of to themselves thought about the first time they ever heard the words human trafficking, you might think, oh, taken, or oh, I saw a missing person sign on at a Walmart. All these different things. I know that a lot of different um, businesses and churches, a lot of them will do these drives where they're raising awareness about human trafficking, and it's kind of just this general umbrella. So it's very mainstream to hear, and for lack of better words, it's even trendy just use the word human trafficking, and then everyone kind of gets that idea. It's just women, or it's just girls, or it's just sex. But there's so many different moving pieces to human trafficking, to labor trafficking. Um, but I mean, once you start to learn a little bit about it, it's like all these lights start to go off,
I
and
bet.
then you start to think about, oh, well, actually, I might know someone who, it might not even just be like migrant farm workers, but
Mhm.
maybe someone who came to this country and maybe they might not have had the proper documentation, and so they got the job that they could, but they were still taken advantage of, and
Mhm.
still cheated out of wages and things like that. That's they're still being exploited.
Yeah.
But it's, again, it's not as talked about, so we don't, that's not where our brain's going to go to.
Yeah, yeah. So even as like an American, I kind of can't fathom what it's like to be a migrant farmer. Excuse me for if that kind of offensive, but hard for me to fathom what it's like to be a migrant farmer, especially in America. We think the land of the free. We think that man, there is no injustices going on in regards to work. Everybody has a fair wage and stuff like that. So, what are some of the challenges that migrant farmers would face that would kind of prevent them from seeking help or whatever it may be? What are some of the challenges they face just being a worker in that area?
hmm So I think the important thing that we'll start with in preface is just kind of getting a scope of like, what exactly is a migrant farm worker? How do they end up here? Because that also has to play with some of our misconceived notions.
Okay.
So I've had conversations with people, and they've said, well, they came to this country, so they must have known what they were signing themselves up for. Or if they took the job, then they should have done research. But what happens is, um, these farmers or these contractors will go to, to Mexico, or the country that they're trying to petition, the farm workers to come from. And so basically they do everything, as we would say, the right way. They fill out any documentation that they need to, so that they get their H-2A visa, which is basically the working visa for them to allow them to come to America, and to work during the growing season. And so they come with this false promise. They come with, these hopes and dreams, like, okay, I'm going to create a better life for my family, so I'm going to go out there. Now, when they get here, for those who are experiencing labor trafficking, it could mean their documentation, as soon as they get here, is taken from them.
Mm.
And obviously, if you don't have your documentation and you're here, and someone takes it, that's just asking for trouble. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not only can documentation be taken, but there's so many farm workers who aren't even allotted proper water breaks or even rest breaks. And so think about the earliest you've ever woken up
Mhm.
and the longest work day you've probably had. These farm workers, they are up and working before the sun rises and when the sun sets.
Mm.
For the specifically for those who are experiencing labor trafficking, in a lot of cases, this is their normal, and they're doing this 5, 6, constantly throughout the week. Like this is their normal. And so there's a lot who have suffered from kidney failure and even death because they didn't have the proper resources that they needed. Not only that, but they might come with the idea that they're going to get a certain pay per bucket that they fill or per hour. Agriculture, it's all very different,
Yeah.
and different pricing and stuff. But they come with the idea of one set pay, but when they get here, it's completely different.
Yeah.
Not only that, but sometimes the trafficking, because of a language barrier, there's trafficking amongst, like, okay, well, here's the farmer, the contractor, and all these different moving pieces. And so it's really easy that these things can occur. And so to answer your question, you said, well, why is it that they might not come forward? And a lot of it has to do with, as a Hispanic woman, I can vouch, like in my culture, it is very machismo. You have to just put up, and you have to be the man, and you can't speak up, you can't be vulnerable. And so some of it's just hanging tight and just enduring.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of farm workers don't know their rights, so they don't know that if they are being exploited, if they are being manipulated or even physically harmed, all these different components, that they can actually apply for a visa that lets us work on their case and provide services for them, which is why we find these hygiene kits to be extremely important. Not just because we're providing water bottles to fight dehydration and kidney failure, and not just because we're providing bags of rice and all those good and great things, but we're also providing information about their rights and about red flags. Hey, if XYZ is happening, these are some signs of labor trafficking, and here's a number you can call so we can get you out of this. And it's all about building that rapport.
Okay, so you see this need in the community. The
Mm-hmm.
Bridge International kind of meets these people in whatever space that they're in, and you
Mm-hmm.
guys kind of help them with resources and stuff like that, or what else do you all do during that
Yeah.
time?
So, we believe that, one person can't do it all, one agency can't do it all. And so we don't seek to do it all. So we love partnering with other agencies that have already been in the fight. Some of them, they provide um, more extensive care, and whether that could be, housing, whether that is counseling and therapy, different things like that. So we come along a lot of agencies that are already doing these different things, and we just see how can we actually help them meet needs.
Yeah.
And depending on our partnership with different places or churches, it looks different.
Mhm. Yeah, and what's interesting, and I talked with Kathy about this, is that I did not know this is right in our backyard. Right, I would think like this is somewhere far east of North Carolina, more coastal to the coast, or maybe west, or somewhere in farm country. So, like, how does where are y'all, or where are the most the population at within Raleigh or Durham, or is it somewhere around here?
Um, so I'm not sure how detailed I can be.
Yeah.
So just for the sake of not being super detailed, just for like safety, I will say it is in our backyard.
Okay. Okay.
Um, it is very, very close, and some of it is just so hidden in plain sight that we don't give it a second thought.
Yeah.
Think near downtown, think, the outskirts of, our cities,
Mhm.
things like that. I mean, it's in your face, but it's also so hidden and tucked away.
Yeah.
And it has so many different faces, right? Because it's not just labor trafficking, and it's not just prostitution, there's
Yeah.
just a lot to it.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. And because of this kind of, you got to play under the radar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's hard for, or it's challenging for churches or organizations to kind of get involved in this ministry, just because of, people might have some fear. They don't know who's
Mm-hmm.
coming to the place or what have you, and you guys are trying to build relationships with these folks, right? With these families or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it may be. So how have like organizations or churches or whoever, how have they partnered with you guys during this time?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways that people can partner with the Bridge International. Obviously, our goal is never to put anyone in harm's way. We're trying to help people who've been exploited. So it would be redundant for us to end up doing that to someone else for the sake of helping other people. Um, but some of the different ways, obviously, the first one I can think of is financial giving, right?
Mhm.
So some churches or businesses have partnered with us in like sponsoring specific things, whether that is a storage unit, so that way we can fill these kits and then have a safe place to put them as we're preparing to send them out. That can also look like actually providing different items that we need to go into these kits, whether that's the drawstring bags or the water bottles. There's just, all the different pieces, they're all essential. Um, Another way that people can partner with us is also kind of just figuring out like what your gifts are and then seeing where our current needs are. We have people who help us run our social media. And so it's a little bit more of the grunt work, the behind the scenes, but we also have people who come and consistently help us go and partner build. And so they come alongside us to go to different businesses in, Durham and Raleigh, and kind of just build that rapport within the community and see how we can get more networked. Some of it can look like connecting us because they have a bigger network than we do. And so just using their inner circle resources and connecting us to people who we can partner with in a different capacity. There's so much power in being able to, word of mouth. And so like talking to people about what we do, it's another way that you can partner with us, which it seems so mundane, it seems so insignificant, but it really makes a difference. I have a friend who's we've done anti-trafficking work for 2 or 3 years now, and in the relationship that we've been able to build, she was the one who actually referred our first intern. And
Wow.
so you kind of never know um, what your friendships and what these partnerships can be, but it all just kind of works together.
Wow. Wow. So quick question. We'll get to the questions in the chat in 1 second. So quick
Mm-hmm.
question. So what if we, what are some of the signs that we could see? I don't know if there's any, if we recognize that in a community that we're either involved in or whatever it may be. What are some of the signs that we might see, and what should our steps be when we do see those type of signs of human trafficking, or we suspect some type of human trafficking in that community? Because really, I mean, I wouldn't know what to do, right? There's a language barrier. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to call the law because I don't want to, put more fear in that family or in the individual. So like all these things I'm kind of worried about. So one, is there anything that kind of stands out that, hey, this might be something wrong? Or, and the second question, like, who should we contact just in case this is the case?
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. You had mentioned like you don't want to do more harm. A lot of times when people, and it, some of it is that, that savior complex that we can, unfortunately just in our culture, in society, we can kind of get caught up, and it was like, oh, I need to rescue that person, or I need to be the one to do this. And, I have to. But unfortunately, sometimes that mentality can do more damage than it does good. And
Wow.
so, if you ever feel like you saw something, it's always good to report it to the National Trafficking Hotline, because what happens is you can call in or text in, and I'll post that phone number at the very end in the chat. What happens is you call or text in and you give them all the information, any red flags you saw, anything that you thought, well, this is kind of suspicious. And what they do is they'll kind of funnel that down to the proper channel of those who can actually do something about it, as opposed to you putting yourself in danger. and just kind of making things worse.
Yeah.
I'll share an experience that I had that I handled something not the best. There was a situation where I was working in a restaurant and I saw a pair come in, and the woman, there was definitely an age gap between the two. And the woman was not making any eye contact with people. She was not touching her food, just very, kind of misplaced. And so I started to get a little worried. I was like, "Wow, this doesn't seem right. Like, she's not talking, but he's just enjoying himself and he's having a grand old time." I'm a little bit concerned. And so I didn't let my managers know or anything. I didn't just text or call into the hotline. I quickly called 911. And what ended up happening was that the officer wanted to speak to the pair in question. And so in that case, if this woman had actually been someone who was being trafficked, I could have put her in more harm. Then in my mind, I thought I was doing the right thing. And so that's why the saying is, if you see something, say something. And we always say, if you're not a trained professional, or if you don't have kind of like the network to know, who within the city to call, it's best just to text or call in that hotline, because they can funnel it down and kind of start to build a report for, if somebody else has made the same call or claim that you yourself has witnessed. Now, when it comes to red flags and signs, sex trafficking is going to be easier or more evident to see, as opposed to like labor trafficking, because more often than not, you're probably not going to be in a situation where you would see someone, working in agriculture, or, somebody who might be, like domestic, like servant and things like that. It's not as common that you would personally be the one to see it. But as I mentioned, some red flags would definitely be, you're in a group setting or any kind of setting and you see someone and they don't have permission to speak. They're being instructed like the things that they can say. And so they're kind of just a puppet, if you will. Some of them might have little to no clothing. They might not even have, personal items with them. Like they might not have a phone, or they might not have a purse, or like anything that shows that they have possession of something. Because that shows you that they lack the control, right? They're not the one responsible for their debit card. They don't play any of the cards. Not only that, but sometimes you'll see tattoos that show ownership, like branded. And so that could be um, from from their pimp, or whatever
Yeah.
the situation may be.
Wow. Wow. Um, so as you know, and I told you earlier, is that as a church, we are kind of taking this journey in regards to like biblical justice, right? And what that
Mm-hmm.
means as a church, as a community, and even as an individual, right? We kind of have to kind of pick up that flag and run with it. Um, so in regards to justice, one, I know you're a believer, right? Christian faith. So how
Mm-hmm.
do you think this lines up with God's definition of biblical justice? How does this organization and the work that you are doing, how do you believe that fits in with biblical justice?
Yeah. My introduction with human trafficking as a whole started in 2014 when I went on my first missions trip. It's actually one of my favorite stories to tell, but I got to serve 2 months in DR in Haiti. And at the time that I went to serve, DR was ranked the second or third world's most trafficked areas.
Wow.
And we went there with the intention like, oh, we're going to do really great things and we're going to love on people, but we might see some things. And so they have you watch these videos, you see the documentaries, and they mentally prepare you for what you could see. And then you get there and you see a girl who's like my age, and she's being hauled into a Dominican taxi by a man who looks American, and there's nothing you can do for her. because you're not in America, and it's not your land, and I have no rights. And that was the first time in being a Christian where I literally didn't know how to pray. And I literally told God that day, as I was fighting back the tears, and obviously me and my team, we were just staring at each other because we all wanted to do something, and there was nothing we could do for her, as we had to watch her, get hauled off into the concho and taken away. And I walked away from that moment just literally asking, like, God, I don't know how to pray for this. And so you have to teach me how to pray for this.
Yeah.
And it was on that same trip that we met this older gentleman. I mean, he must have been like 70s, 80s, like very, 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 he was up there. But he was the sweetest man we'd ever met. And he had a home probably the size of many of our bathrooms. And he had a 3-legged dog and a guitar that was missing a couple strings. But in his broken English and in our broken Spanish, we would try and sing songs together. And our team would go once a day, and we'd send a couple people out to go and try and minister to him and just love on him. Well, one day we were on the mountain, a few of us on our team, and our team leaders, that were hosting us, they came up and told us we could no longer see him anymore. And we were very confused. And so obviously, as inquisitive kids, just, why can't we see Santiago? And it was then that we found out that he had a baby with a girl who was less than 13. And I remember everyone in my team just being filled with disgust and anger and possibly even hate. And it's like this small voice just told me, Michelle, I let you see who I created him to be before I let you see his sin.
Mm.
And now you can never say you don't know how to pray for this.
Wow.
And it was in that moment that it dawned on me that no matter if it's a John who's the one purchasing, no matter if it's the trafficker who's doing the exploiting, or if it is the person who is a victim or a survivor, every person involved within the industry, these are all God's children. And before they were exposed to what they were exposed to, or before they dabbled in this sin, like, God created them with a plan and a purpose. And as hard as it was for me, I opened myself up to the idea that, like, God loves them. And no matter who or where they are in their life, like, God still looks at them with love. And if God, who created them, can look on them with love, then I could be able, to pray for those who are hurting, because everybody involved in the within the human trafficking umbrella, they're all hurting in some capacity. And it's something we often forget. And so for me personally, when I think about biblical justice, I think about where in Isaiah it talks about learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow.
Amen. Yep.
And so I think you can't think about human trafficking and not think this breaks God's heart. Because every person who's involved in some capacity is oppressed.
Yeah.
And whether that has to do with the demonic oppression, or that has to do with the physical act, they're all hurting and suffering. And so for the Bridge International, I can say that we want to serve every population. For every population that has been overlooked because the color of their skin, their lack of education, or their education, the amount of money they come from, or the different factors that contribute to vulnerabilities. We want to serve everyone, regardless, because we believe that everyone deserves freedom and a chance for restoration.
Amen. Amen. Man, that was a sermon right there. Uh, one last question, and then we'll get to the questions in the box. If you guys have any questions, please type them in the box. One last question. You have been on this journey for a long time, and you already told a couple stories. But since you have been at the Bridge International, what is one story that kind of impacted you the most? That, man, like, you just think back at this story, and this kind of gives you life again, because we know it's hard work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people, I mean, obviously, even within the church, right? You preach the gospel, some people are not listening, not everybody's responding. And I know that's kind of the same, no matter if it's migrant farm workers or wherever it may be, not everybody responds the way we want them to respond. So we have to
Mm-hmm.
kind of draw back to a past experience. So what has, or tell me a story, or tell us a story that kind of impacted you the most, that, man, like, just keeps you on fire, that keeps you going.
Mm-hmm. Um, well, it's um yeah. So on Sundays we do one of our outreaches, and we partner with a local church, and they lead a service, but they also meet tangible needs. So whether that's food, clothing, and so what we do is we'll spend like an hour or two, just knocking in the area, just kind of letting people know, hey, this is where we're gonna be at. Come on by. Um, One of the days, as soon as I pulled up to start doing our outreach, I had seen this woman, and she had a couple bags on her. And so quickly it was like, hey, how are you? This is what we're doing. Like, if you have a need, like, swing on by. We're going to also have a church service after. If you want to stay and hang out with us, like, please do. And right away, she just started telling me her story. And so I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm here for it. And so I'm listening, and I'm starting to hear just all these different things, and it's overwhelming, but you want to be that, you want to be that earpiece. And so I listened to her and heard about the things that she was going through. And then I walked away from the conversation because I had to return to outreach, and I told her I'd be right back. And so we sat together for the message, and every 10-15 minutes she'd look at me and she'd say, hey, I have to go to the bathroom. I'll be back. And so she'd point in the direction of where a bathroom was, but every time she got up to leave, she would sneak off somewhere completely different than where she said she was going. And so I didn't say anything. I was like, okay. So it happened like 2 or 3 different times. And then at the end, she was trying to figure out where she was going to put her head to bed, to rest at night. And we tried to give her some resources and things like that. But as we were like, hey, we're going to share with you some resources and like get you connected and just do all the things that we can do for you, she once again was like, okay, well, I'm going to be right back. And so she, snuck away again. And when she came back, she had items with her. But she wasn't actually staying in the area. So things just weren't adding up. And so it was pretty easy to read the story. And in that instance, I walked away from the experience very overwhelmed. And I know, like, this is supposed to be like, what gives you life, and I'll get there in a second. But you know walking away from that experience, the whole weekend I just felt so overwhelmed and so overwhelmed and so overwhelmed, because I felt like I couldn't do enough for her, and like I couldn't in that moment change her situation. But what I had to learn and realize, the more that I unpacked it, was that she was not yet ready. And that wasn't a reflection of me. There was nothing more I could have done. And as much as like I didn't want to be okay with it, like I had to force myself to be okay with it. But with that, because that was the first time I had really experienced something firsthand, where it wasn't like, oh, one of the founders experienced this and they're telling me their story, but it was me, you know, as part of the bridge going through this, and feeling overwhelmed or feeling like I didn't do enough, or wondering like, oh my gosh, did she find a place to stay? Is she alive? Is she okay? Is she being exploited? Like, what's happening to her right now? And it was in prayer, that I really had to lean on God. And I know it's probably like a cliche answer, but when we're talking about such heavy things, right? Because this work is heavy.
Yeah.
The only thing that gives me hope and the only thing that gives me joy to keep doing what we do is God. It's his strength, it is his joy, it is his righteousness, because you see a lot and you hear a lot and you're going to feel a lot, because you're exposed to so much at such a quick rate. But when we can lean on God, we can be reminded that, like, God loves every single one of his children far more than we could ever think that we could love someone. And God's going to continue to put people in that person's path, and he's going to continue to create opportunities for that person, and it'll be on them to seize those opportunities, but God hasn't forgotten about them. And so it would be very audacious, if you will, for me to think like, oh well, I was their only hope. So it gives me hope and joy, and it keeps me going, knowing that, like, God has a plan for all his children, and all we can do is we can play our part and keep planting those seeds, because eventually, I believe eventually that person will be ready, and it might not be me, but it could be the next person, because we're going to keep going out and we're going to keep doing this work.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
We will get to the. Are you able to see the chat box?
Yes, I have it pulled up.
Okay, you could go ahead and.
Okay, I'll start with the first one. How does the North Carolina Human Trafficking Commission play into your work? So we do have some established partnerships, and some of that has to do with the work that our founders did in their previous employment. I can't speak on that too much, unfortunately, just because I am primarily focused on public relations, and so I don't do as much of the outreach, like the labor outreach aspect of things. What I will say is tomorrow I am actually moderating a expert to come and share. And it's going to be another Google chat just like this. And so if we're able to record it, we can probably post that link on our website. So Nancy Hagan will be speaking, and she's actually the, I believe she's the coordinator or the director of training. And she has over 20 years of experience specific to labor trafficking, but she has expertise all across the board, primary to North Carolina, and she actually works with the Human Trafficking Commission. So I don't want to give you the wrong answers. Sorry, I know it's not helpful.
That's fine.
Are we working with Justice Matters? No, I have actually not heard of Justice Matters, but I will definitely make a note of that. We're currently in the partner building stage, so we've been doing a little bit of research and just trying to find out all the different agencies and which ones align with our mission and vision, and kind of just starting to build the rapport to do partnerships. So that's definitely worth looking into. Is this exclusively in agriculture or also in domestic service or other jobs? Are you talking about labor trafficking for this, or do you mean primarily to like what the Bridge International does? I guess I could answer both. The Bridge International serves not just for survivors of labor trafficking, but we do also serve sex trafficking survivors. And yes, it can be all. You can find labor trafficking within agriculture, and I lost it. Whoops. Yes, you can find it in domestic service or other jobs. Let me see, did I miss any?
I think that's it.
Okay.
Almost. Well, we got one more.
That's a very good question. Are most of the people you serve alone, or are there also families? There's a lot of families. And I'll kind of touch on just like a big need that we have as the bridge. So our primary goal is to bridge gaps. And one of the gaps is housing. In the anti-trafficking movement, there's so many good things happening. But it's not a perfect system, and we're all growing and learning. And so a big need is being able to offer housing to underserved groups. And what I mean is men. There's not a lot of places that will take in men. And so a lot of times when a man is referred, he's often referred to go to a shelter or a place that's not trauma informed or specific to human trafficking. And so it's really hard to get a full healing and restoration when you don't have a place to stay. It also is going to hinder people from actually being able or wanting to come forward. Families is another one. Families, there's not a lot of places for them. Women with children, there's not a lot of places for them. I'll even go as far as saying the LGBTQ community, there's not a lot of places for them. And so if we want to see people healed and restored, there's got to be housing for everyone. See, IJM is here in Raleigh as well as Durham. Please contact them. They're very established. Yes, we do have connection to Salvation Army and IJM. I have a few people who are connected to, I believe, one of the chapters, and it might be Raleigh for IJM. Thank you.
Cool. That looks like all the questions that we have. Cruz, I don't know if you're able to put the website in the chat box so people could see how we could partner along with you all on this journey.
Absolutely.
Man, so you say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say I just shared the website. So on there it gives you a little glimpse of what we're currently working on right now. So we're currently doing a Put a Cap on the Gap campaign, and that's collecting items for these hygiene kits that we provide to the migrant farm workers. But there's also different volunteer opportunities coming up, as well as like an Amazon wish list that for anyone who wants to do a contact-free partnership, they can, have items and they'll be sent to us to build those. There's also a volunteer form if anyone's like, hey, I might not be able to give, but I'd love to maybe build some kits. And so there's probably a date in the next couple months that you can come out, and we'll have a very small team, socially distanced with masks. And people would just kind of help put together these kits to be taken out. There's a few other needs. I won't get into all them right now, but for all those things, you can find them at thebridgeinternational.net.
Great. Well, Cruz, I appreciate the time that you have spent with us and kind of giving us just an update of what you guys are doing at the Bridge International. And I'm looking forward to partnering with you guys in the future and see what this relationship could look like, and hoping to have you guys come speak in person and sometime in the fall or the summer. So thanks again for the work that you are doing. And we will be praying for you, obviously. And I want to thank for everybody that was able to join this call. So everybody have a good night, and we'll see y'all soon. Thanks, Cruz.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.